So this picture here is the Chicago Honey Co-op. This is a picture of Michael Thompson, and I heard about Michael's work, and I went up to meet him one day. I wanted to see his the apiary. I wanted to see what he was doing with the bees and everything. There's a picture. You see the Sears Tower in the background behind all those towers there, bee towers. But what was interesting about this is the honey is very eclectic. Just like the Chicago is a melting pot of the human population, it's also a melting pot for weeds. Think over the last couple of centuries, the number of trucks and wagons and things that have come through the city and dropped weed seeds from all over the world. And there's a lot of empty and abandoned lots in Chicago. So there are weeds growing from March all the way through November. There are plants, weed plants flowering. And these bees just have a great time. They find honey, nectar everywhere. And the honey is this exquisite tasting honey. So they package it in this really high-end jar, and they sell it to as top dollar to local restaurants and boutique shops in Chicago and get top dollar for it. And the people who do the work, as Michael calls them, he says they are the underemployed. These are mostly people that have been in prison. They're out. They have close to no chance in heck of finding a job. And he says we don't just employ them. He says we teach them the business. They learn how to grow, how to raise bees. They learn how to package. They learn how to sell. They learn how to run a business. And by the time they're done working with the bee operation for a couple of years, they can start their own business. But what was interesting about this to me is I turned around and I said, well, Michael, look at slide 102. What's going on back here? This looks like a garden area. He said, oh, yeah, that's our community garden project. We had some of the people working with us wanted to grow food, and there's some soil back there, so we started putting in some gardens. And I went over and looked at the soil, and I see rock, and I see broken glass, I see cinders. And I said, well, gosh, it's kind of nasty stuff, isn't it? And he says, well, we made a deal with the horse track. They were bringing truckloads of their stable sweepings, straw manure, and they would bring it and dump it right on the concrete. We'd let it break down for a year. Then we'd take wheelbarrows and we'd take it out there. And we'd stack it 2.5 feet high, and we would plant right in the compost. And so all the plants that you see are actually in compost. They're not in this, this crummy soil. But I'm looking at these other piles on the concrete, and I said, what's going on here? He says, well, we started seeing weeds come up. These piles, we couldn't use it all. We didn't transport it all over to the garden. Some of it's still sitting on the concrete. And weeds started coming up, and I thought, well, gosh, if we can grow vegetables over there on top of that ground, why can't I just grow vegetables here? I just got to be sure that the beds get watered. So we started planting vegetables, and one year he had like 25 different varieties of vegetables in these mounds all over the concrete. If you look at the next picture, you can see the variety of plants and flowers and vegetables that he's growing. Now, this is on concrete. You think we might be able to find some abandoned concrete in the city of Chicago so we could grow some lush gardens like this? All it takes is soil. You've got sunlight, you've got water, if you've got rain, if you've got hose. All you need is soil, and you can create beauty anywhere. What I really loved was in the fall we went back, we took a class up there, and harvesting sweet potatoes. If any of you have harvested sweet potatoes, it's a lot of digging. They get down there about 14, 15 inches. You really have to dig deep. It's a lot of work. All Michael did is he took the shovel, he slid it along the concrete, slammed it into the side of the pile, shook the shovel up and down to loosen the soil. Then he grabbed the sweet potato by the plant by the throat and picked it up. And here's all these sweet potatoes hanging right from his hand. Totally untouched, unblemished, perfect condition. I'm telling Becky, I said, I want to pour a concrete pad in our backyard so I can grow sweet potatoes like Michael. So there's hope for the city. I mean, we got rooftops, we've got concrete. We can grow food anywhere. This next picture shows you on the left-hand side. This is a schoolyard, school in the background. This was an asphalt parking lot. Now it's a flower garden and vegetable garden for children. Next picture is the Chicago Center for Green Technology, solar and green roofs up there. Another interesting project they're looking at down in St. Louis, this is on the drawing boards from what I understand, is restoring an industrial building that's only like 4 blocks from downtown St. Louis. It's called Culver Way Eco Village. The plan is to convert this manufacturing facility, this old building, into a whole series of condominiums with all kinds of shared facilities. They'll have dining areas, they'll have greenhouses, they'll have common areas like gardens, possibly shops, laundries. If you can imagine, everybody doesn't have to have everything in their own apartment. They can share a lot of this stuff. The cost for these apartments would be very low, and they would all be within walking distance of downtown St. Louis, so people would not need automobiles necessarily. It's very creative. We can take old buildings, old areas, and refurbish them and do it in a very cooperative way to save costs of energy and the cost of living. And then finally, commercial and public applications. This is a picture of the AGL Center at Oberlin College. Look at all that glass. I look at this building and I think, boy, what an energy drain. But this building, because of the way it was designed, and because of the way they hold heat, processes water, it uses 80% less energy than any other building on campus by square foot. We have the ability to design buildings that will not only generate all the energy that they need just by standing there, but over the life of the building will generate an excess amount of energy that can be fed into a grid, and that in effect will end up offsetting the energy invested in the very materials and in the process of building the building in the first place. So you end up with a net carbon situation. That's what we need. We need to be building buildings that operate the same way as a tree, that produce more than they consume. And we know how to do it. We can do it. Is it more expensive? Yeah. But we do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. And in the long run, when the price of energy goes up, it's the smart thing to do economically. The next slide is a permaculture greenhouse, and we're going to spend an hour at your course talking about greenhouses. I've been looking into these quite a bit. I've never built one, but I've come across a lot of interesting information. Imagine, look at the next slide, imagine we could have a greenhouse, a permaculture greenhouse, that grew the exact same vegetables 365 days a year, or 52 weeks a year. And I'm not talking about just tomatoes or lettuce. I'm talking about all winter long. Imagine you walk into the greenhouse. The date is January 23rd, and you're going in there and you're going to harvest lettuce and broccoli and tomatoes and green beans and zucchini, all the things that we love to eat all year long that we buy from the grocery store. Now, if you could produce that, obviously you're going to need a heat source that doesn't cost a lot of money, that doesn't create pollution. You're going to need light because you're going to have to get vegetables, you have to have light. You can grow greens in the winter, but to get something to turn color, you got to have light. So you're going to have to turn lights on in the morning and the evening. But if there were a way to do that, do you think you could find a couple of neighbors that would be willing to, pay you $50 a week for a big basket of fresh vegetables? They're CSA, and provide them with a fresh basket of organic fresh vegetables every week. And if the greenhouse was just big enough that you could do 20 of those a week, that's $1,000 a week growing vegetables in a greenhouse in your backyard. To me, that's the goal. That's what we have to do. As long as we're going to be living here in the temperate climate zone, we've got to find ways to use simple technology to create greenhouses to produce food. Obviously, we can do a lot with storage. We can do a lot with microgreens. We can do a lot of other things. But if we're going to live up here, we're going to have. It would be nice to have foods that were fresh and delicious. But at the same time, if we're going to do it, we have to do it responsibly. We have to do it in such a way that we do not pollute the planet and consume it.